Give me a 3, 2, 1 when you're ready. All right, here we are back at the Conscious Queries podcast. I am your host, Dominic Persicino. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a very special episode for you today. So before we get started, make sure you like and subscribe, and you will see new episodes every week on Tuesday mornings. So here we are at the Conscious Queries podcast. My very special guest today is Kate. And she is she's involved in psychedelic and therapy. So she's the perfect person that I wanted to have on to talk more about kind of the psychedelic revolution that's going on, the benefits and kind of the societal impacts that come with that kind of culture. So I'm going to pass it off to you and maybe give us a bit of an introduction about you and your work.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Dominic. It's really a pleasure to be here. I always love to have a platform to talk about psychedelics on, so thank you again for giving me this opportunity. I'm Kate Bloy, and I'm a psychotherapist. I'm the CEO of Therapeutic Alliance here in Winnipeg, which is a multidisciplinary therapy practice. So we're kind of integrated services for many different types of therapy for many different people. And we operate for fair profit. So that's one of the things that I'm involved in, as well as the Winnipeg Psychedelic Society. I'm the president of the newly founded Winnipeg Psychedelic Society of Winnipeg. It's actually the correct name. And that's a new young group that's forming locally, but also networking with other groups like itself throughout the country and throughout the world, actually, because the psychedelic renaissance is happening the world over. So right. Winnipeg is on the map in that way too. I'm also a psychedelic therapist, which means that I work with people in different ways using different kinds of medicines, and I'm constantly upgrading my skills. I just recently finished ketamine certification to work with ketamine, which is, I guess you could call it a psychedelic substance. It has psychedelic properties to it and can be used very effectively in psychotherapy right in the session. So a session takes about 2 hours, and a person receives some ketamine and then experiences the experience. They're prepared for this experience. They go into it intentionally, and then afterward, therapy is provided to integrate the experience. So it's a different approach to psychedelics from the usual. When we think of psychedelics, what's the first thing that comes to mind, right?
Right.
You think about music festivals, maybe, or hippies in the 60s or whatever.
A Grateful Dead concert or a...
Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
That's
a
right.
protest.
Yeah. Yes. And I mean, for some of us, that's just cool. That's groovy. That's great. That's fun. But for other of us, it's kind of like, well, yeah, that's good for them, but that's not for me at all. That's not where I'm at. That's not my orientation. You know?
There is a time and a place for everything, right? And, maybe a music concert is not a time and a place to try a tranquilizer, right? Or to try, a substance that could really impact your ability to walk around and to function properly, or sometimes you don't want to be in the scorching heat and be dehydrated at a music festival and then take mushrooms, and then it's not going to be a very fun experience. You're actually going to be in a probably not a good time,
I'm not assuming. A pretty sight.
Right.
Well,
right.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it's another one of the things that I like to do. My annual charity is to donate my time at the Winnipeg Folk Festival and co-coordinate the psychedelic harm reduction area
Right.
with Project Safe Audience. And those guys, I just want a little shout out to Project Safe Audience for the great job that they do every summer and have been doing throughout this pandemic as well. Wherever people are gathering and using substances, Project Safe Audience is there, making sure that people get the help and support they need rather than ending up in handcuffs or
Right.
strapped to a gurney somewhere. So just great work, guys. Keep up the good work.
Right.
And I love working with them at Folk Fest. But yes, we do see, as you say, a number of people who've used a substance unintentionally. Maybe they wanted to get high, but they didn't realize what was going to happen, and they end up in a bad situation. But I mean, we always say in the wonderful world of psychedelics that in psychedelic therapy there are really set and setting are very important, and I like to add into that as well. Dosage is also very important. There is a concert dose for psilocybin that can be quite pleasant in a social gathering, but if you do a heroic dose in at a concert and everything starts pixelating and you don't know where you are, it's like you said, it's not so much fun anymore. So but there is that's the other thing too, is that the way that we in our culture use medicine is different. We use drugs, we use pharmaceuticals and we use drugs. We hear this phrase all the time, but think about what it really is saying is you're using. Like no one likes to be used. You don't like to be used. No one that doesn't feel good being used. No one likes that, right? And certain medicines,
there's a connotation of abuse.
Yes, yes, it is. It's abusive. It's manipulative. When someone is using you, you want to pull back from that person. Right. Try to. If you're wise, you'll
is it
withdraw.
Manipulative to do agriculture and to produce mass amounts of food for it's part of that's like is it inappropriate for scientists to do research because it's you're doing too much inquisitiveness instead of it being productive, or it's kind of a weird
it's an approach, right? Like you say, it's weird because on the one hand, it can be really good for science to work with human subjects in a respectful way and in a way where people are giving informed consent and we're finding out more things that we need to know. But on the other hand, if people are not being able to give informed consent and being co-opted into some kind of experiment that they had no intention of participating in, is it ethical? And so there's all the ethics of the psychedelic renaissance too, and we're coming at it from our cultural perspective with not the greatest ethics. I mean, if you want to think about set and setting again, set is your mindset and setting is the place where you are. So if you're in a good state of mind and you're in a good place and you take some psychedelics, chances are you're going to have a productive time. And if you have, if you're engaging in psychedelic therapy and you have, a well-trained trip sitter with you, your chances are even better that you're going to get something really productive out of it. But let's look at it culturally, the set and setting that the psychedelic renaissance is emerging in. I mean, it's emerging in the setting of a capitalist society.
Right. It's becoming commoditized.
Yes. And the mindset of that capitalist society is to use and consume in a kind of a selfish sort of conquering kind of way. And so, and it's, clearly
instead of having a symbiotic relationship with nature or with these substances.
Yes, exactly. And we were talking about this a little bit before we got started, so let's get back to that connection with nature. So one of the things that using psychedelics intentionally will do for you, and this is different from using really, let's sort of transition from using into experiencing the benefits of psychedelics by forming an actual relationship with that plant. And it is the kind of plant that you can form a relationship with. I mean, I think you could with most plants, but the old joke about tree huggers and everything. It's not so funny really for the people that are actually putting their bodies, their life at risk to save something that is important to them.
Right.
But
It's
I
a lot
feel
easier when
they
the
must
plant
be
talks
deeply
back to
moved.
you.
Yes, but there are some, and we use plants in all aspects of our lives. When you think about it, we wear them, we live in structures that are built from them, we eat them. But these particular psychedelics, their particular use for us is their actual teacher plants. And when you take them into your body, they actually can help you in ways with your thinking and with your understanding and with your connection to nature. So this is what will happen with the right setting and dosage on an individual level for a human being.
That's a really
Um,
good point.
and it will help you to connect to nature. And once people have had that experience of connecting to nature, it makes people more conscious of what our place in nature is, and maybe some of the things that we could do better to be a good part of nature, a part that fits in
Right.
to
Instead of
nature.
being deconstructive or antagonistic towards it.
Yes, even destructive,
Right.
or uncaring. So
Right.
even if you're just complacent, you're not chopping down rainforests or something like that. You're just complacent, um, and suddenly after, let's say, a mushroom trip, you realize, gee, look at all the plastic I throw into the garbage. Is that really necessary? Is there some better way I could be doing things to communicate with the earth that held me so tenderly during those hours that I was experiencing it?
The
So,
most ironic thing is that it gives you a reality check, and that's
mm,
sometimes very offensive to people's ego or to their personality. So they,
mm.
they dismiss it as a negative experience.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up as well. So, yeah, the ego is part of the mindset of our whole culture, as well as what is encouraged in us as individuals. And the reason I think for that is because it goes really well with capitalism. So if you want to have a capitalist society in which you have a a dedicated workforce slash consumer group, then you need to be able to have some way of directing, controlling people in a way, directing their minds, I
Right.
guess, right? So people focus in on consumerism and buying, and that is all to make themselves look good to other people, which is all about the ego. It's about our
Status.
image, what we're
Right.
putting out there. We want to look young, we want to look sexy, we want to look wealthy, we want to look all these things. And people are so busy pursuing that. They spend hours and hours of their week
Projecting what they
pursuing
want. Yeah. Yeah.
that. Yeah, that consumer culture, that to get that look, to get that kind of attention, to fit within the normal boundaries of
Right.
our culture. And that was going on right up until 2020. And that's, I guess, we joke about the blessings of COVID, but that's for sure one of them, is that it did make us take a pause and realize, wow, we've been running ourselves ragged, and what for, you know
Right.
like.
The constant progression of and we need to constantly have growth and wealth is kind of the delusion that we just need to care about each other and have make sure our communities function, but beyond that, we don't need to go in excess in consumerism. But I mean, at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
it's being physical beings that need to eat and need to housing. It's very difficult to not be materialistic and not need our creature comforts. It is
Oh,
difficult.
sure. Oh, creature comforts, of course, but it's just when we have so much more that other people in the world
Right.
don't even have creature comforts. They don't even have food or shelter
Right.
because we are consuming so much of the resources, and so it really is about there's the I culture and there's the we culture,
Right.
and in Western culture is very much about me, about I, about the ego, right? And so plant medicine comes along into our culture and first emerged in the 60s because of a sort of an accident, I guess, or what, something happened there. The first white man was initiated into a ceremony of mushroom medicine with the great shaman Maria Sabina in Oaxaca, Mexico, in the 50s. And she allowed him to experience this on the promise that he wouldn't share it. But he did share it. He wrote an article in Life magazine that brought a number of people, Mick Jagger, Timothy Leary, Bob Dylan, the Beatles, cultural icons that had this experience with Maria Sabina in one of her mushroom ceremonies, and it expanded their thinking. It changed their minds about how they perceived reality, and then they started translating that into art and music and education, culture, and it was like a spark that just set off this huge explosion, cultural explosion of the 60s that changed everything. I'm actually fortunate to be old in these times because I'm old enough to remember that I was conscious and interested in what was going on at the time. And so the 60s culture was a big part of my early days and a big part of my formative years. So it was really, really great to have been there at that time. However, it was a sort of like, you could tell it was a powerful experience. We all knew that. And obviously the powers that be knew that too, because the CIA was really interested in investigating how to use it. And the military had plans to kind of Manchurian candidate this stuff, if you know what I mean, like use it to control
Right.
soldiers' minds. So
Well, they
to
want to
make
weaponize anything they can, of course.
weaponize it, exactly.
Right.
And when they realized they weren't able to do that, then they just banned everything, just shut it right down. Well, they told a bunch of lies in the media. It'll scramble your chromosomes and you'll have kids with two heads. Don't take LSD. All
You
that
always
kind of
remember the scrambled
lies.
eggs propaganda commercial. This is your brain on marijuana, and it's like
On
a person making a scrambled egg, and you're like, is that accurate? Because I think you'd be dead instantly if your brain was doing that. So it's a little, extremism and, those kind of campaigns. I really want to ask
little
you.
weird message too. I was cooking breakfast for my 4-year-old one morning, and he said, "That's drugs, Mummy."
So I really want to ask you this specifically. I personally view that there's a lot of the problem with the big boundary stopping psychedelics in the modern era is, I think, like a lot of the ancient cultures, like in Greece, where we have the trials of Eleusis, where we have a set and setting that is a cultural tribal tradition where it's become the norm, where once you become a young adult, if you want to become an influential political or a teacher or a public figure, you would go to the trial of Eleusis. You would have that special experience with a certain psychedelic, and Marcus Aurelius did it. A lot of other historical figures did those kinds of experiences, and maybe that's what we're lacking. Is we're lacking a ritual setting for the psychedelics to be practiced in the right way, so that people can get the right experiences with it, so that the context, like everything else, context matters. So it's one way to do DMT in your apartment, and it's one way to do it with a shaman or a psychedelic teacher that's there to help
Yeah.
you along the journey, and maybe that's what we're lacking, is that those kind of rituals. What do you make of all that?
Well, I'm glad you're bringing this up because it is so important to really, as we're introducing these substances back into our culture again, um, so many years later, um, it is really important to look at what are the rituals and what are the meanings that we make of this, because rituals are about meaning making. And so in other cultures, um, people are introduced to it when they're young. Like ayahuasca is quite common. I mean, no one thinks of it as drugs or illegal or bad or anything. They're introduced to it when they're children. Iboga in Africa, I think kids start taking it when they're about 9. It's kind of a rite of passage. It's not thought poorly of at all. They're in a safe setting in their community and well held by elders who've passed down this tradition for thousands of years. So um, they're 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 good. Um, the thing is, here in our culture, we're sort of spiritual orphans in a way, because we don't have that kind of legacy in our conscious mind. Jung would say, that everything is in your DNA, all the way back to a single-celled creature that divided through cell division, and everything evolved. But we don't have that same connection to spiritual traditions that involve the use of plant medicines in our current society, in our civilization. And we are the first major civilization on earth that has not used plant medicines. All others did. And you mentioned the Greeks. The Hindus had the soma, the Greeks had the kykeon. There's a lot of speculation that early Christians were using magic mushrooms. So, I mean, there's a history of this throughout the world, but where is the history of this in our culture? We are all really basically immigrants from Europe, and I guess when they went through Europe, burning witches and stamping out the what they called pagan religions,
Right.
they took away any connection that we had to our medicine roots, and now we're going to have to find a way to claim that back. Because if you take the Peruvian ayahuasca culture, or Santo Daime, which is awesome and wonderful, that's the use of medicine in a Christian context.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's all these different ways of going about it. There's the Native American church, where you can use peyote in a traditional way. There are traditions that we can participate in that can be really helpful to us, and help to get us started. But ultimately, as it becomes more prevalent in our society, the danger here is that we will medicalize it.
Right.
I mean, who are the demigods of our society? It's doctors, right? So the chances of us medicalizing it and turning it into that kind of a ritual, a medical
Right.
ritual, is quite high. We need to kind of look at what we could do to do things a little more consciously and a little differently from that.
Right. The last thing we want is the pharmaceutical industry, monopolizing it as well.
Oh yeah.
It's it's um it's it's really unfortunate that they basically, essentially, in the 60s in America, they criminalized a culture and a philosophy, which is essentially, as you said, it would be essentially, going against pagan religious or spiritual beliefs, and saying your religious practices are illegal and out of
Mm-hmm.
outlawed. And that is kind of an atrocity now that we look back on that, and we say, well, unless it's they weren't hurting anybody. So why would they criminalize people that would, worship the seasons and the eclipse of the moon? It's like, well, what's wrong with that? People worship all sorts of things. So what's the big deal with worshiping nature, or putting some sort of metaphysical spirituality in nature? Which, I mean, it makes the most sense. And you bring up a really good point where we're so infantilized as a culture, where we're very consumer, very, the government will spoon feed us, companies give us products to fix our problems, yet realistically we're the source of our problems, we're the source of our happiness. And it seems that it's an issue when we look at ourselves no longer as a group and a collective, and we start thinking of ourselves as isolated individuals. It becomes a real problem.
I'm so glad you used that word, because that is what happens. We end up being isolated, and money is God in our culture. That's what we spend most of our time thinking about: money and acquisitions, and like we said earlier, ego-driven goals.
So any drug that doesn't comply with that those goals are thrown out of the table or made illegal, because they make you question, why would I sit in a factory for 8 hours stomping one machine? This is my only life. Why would I give my time and effort away to somebody else? My time's worth more than what they're paying me, right? So those realizations are not very good for the consumer market, when people know their true value, when people start to appreciate their life and their experiences more than just being a cog in a machine, or just serve to get to those ends. You get a paycheck and you get a wealth accumulation, which the fact that resources are,
Yeah.
it's a complicated issue to find an economic solution to resource management. And we would like to imagine that with agriculture, with technology, that we could quite literally make, well, we do have an abundance in food, and we throw away 40% of it because we're not selling it. We'd rather throw it out than give it away to people that need it, which is really unfortunate. And that's the kind of policy that is problematic. And I'm really glad that some countries like France, they've made it illegal for grocery stores to sell produce that's still good. And these kinds of policy changes are what we're looking for. And maybe slowly but surely we're waking up and bringing back spirituality, or bringing back some kind of that kind of those rituals and spirituality back to our lives, because for the longest time it's been overlooked, and it's been after the Christian faith, a lot it became into Darwinism, and then we have the nihilist reductionists. And then now, realistically, we've done so much research on the human brain. They've done rat brain research, and they still can't definitively say what is the human mind, where is the consciousness in biological matter, because they would do these tests, and they would cut out parts of this brain and parts of the other brain, and the rat would still be alive and would still be able to function. And so they really can't put the nucleus of what is really consciousness at the end of the day. So this question is still up for grabs and still up for debate when we're talking about science and spirituality, I think.
It's the beautiful mystery, isn't it?
Right.
Where we don't know when we got here, and we don't know when we're leaving, and we don't know where we came from, and we don't know where we're going. It's and yet we're also busy doing something. That, I guess, going back to what you're saying earlier about people, working in their mundane jobs, whatever, and just sort of slogging it out as we're expected to do, and really wondering, what is it all for? And I think what happens is we see more and more and more people, as the Industrial Revolution progressed to its ultimate failure, like any machine. It it has put people at such a disadvantage that people are they're using um, they're using antidepressants, they're using anti-anxiety, they're using painkillers, they're using substances like alcohol and opiates to numb the pain, the emotional pain as well as the physical pain. That part that in your brain that feels emotional pain also feels physical pain. It's the same area, so it numbs things out, and that's what people are looking to do. Be it their martini or whatever, or a bottle of Lysol.
This
Like,
is
it doesn't
a
matter.
really great
Sorry.
point you bring up. Like, this is the ironic part of people who are against psychedelics. They say, "Oh, I want to be completely here in reality." Yet people that take, pills, all those suppressants and the depressants, they're trying to sedate themselves out of reality. And it's actually psychedelics that make reality more crystal clear. It takes away some of the blinders where you get to see reality even better. So that's the ironic dichotomy of the philosophy of people who refuse to even try a psychedelic.
Well, and I understand, based on conditioning, why they would have that steadfast refusal to try something that would challenge their perception of reality. In the words of Stanislav Grof, we live in a culture that is cognoscentric. By that, he means the only kind of acceptable mental processing, the most highly valued, is alert problem solving. And this, of course, feeds right into the whole capitalist work consumer thing. So it's be a good little meat robot, and be thinking about how to solve problems so we can keep the machinery going. And that's kind of the mindset that we have been gradually coerced into. So we don't value anything else. A hallucination, if you even look up psychedelics on the Health Canada website, it specifies that it can cause people to have hallucinations, and they felt compelled to add the words, which are not real.
Right.
And I find that such a narrow point of view, because another way of looking at it, and the way that people throughout the ages have looked at the use of psychedelics, is that you will have visions, and it will connect you to nature as well as to your own nature, your own internal wisdom. And you will see things, and things that you could really learn from. And I emphasis on the word "could really learn from," because a very important part of using psychedelics, there's that word again, a very important part of experiencing psychedelics is to integrate the experience afterwards, right, so that you can get the benefit from it.
Right. And, trying different things, it's always a challenge for a lot of people to, change their mindset. And, once they've made up their mind, it's really difficult to get out of there. But, the argument that it's the argument of the scientific Darwinist reductionist establishment of saying it's only perturbed brain chemistry. It's only, you're only adding a chemical that, makes it so that you're seeing colors and stuff like that. And it's like, well, that's the argument of someone who's never had a near life and death experience, somebody who's never had that kind of experience where, they've kind of gotten out of their comfort zone of reality, because, it's a naive perspective. That's like asking somebody's opinion about sex who's never had it. It's you can't
Right.
You're not allowed to have an opinion if you've never done it. It's ridiculous.
Well, it's cognoscentric.
Right.
Yes, virginal.
Right. It's like, oh, this is all, cute talking, but, come back to me when you've had an experience, and, then we can have a real discussion, right?
Right. But the thing is that people feel like, well, no, that would not be something that I would want to do with my mind, because I don't want to change who I am, or I don't want to be frightened. They hear a lot of stories about bad trips and
It
things
might
like this.
threaten their placing in the hierarchy of society. It might threaten their, you know, if your social circle is very against it, you know, you might lose all your friends if you bring up that notion to your friends that are completely opposed to it. So it can alienate. You can alienate yourself by trying to open yourself up and open people's minds.
It's true. That's certainly true, this is sort of following decriminalization and legalization of psychedelics is following along the same footsteps here in Canada as did cannabis, both legally and socially. I mean, I remember a time, I think many of us do, where it wasn't cool to admit that you were a cannabis user, because that could impact your possibility for promotions at work, your friendship circles, etc., right? Your credibility in
Right.
general. And now everybody accepts it as, something that's, everybody likes edibles, and or
Right.
most people do.
Even though
And
for Elon Musk, smoking a joint on Joe Rogan apparently cost him quite a lot in the stock market. But you know, that's like a public reaction, and maybe that was a good first step to, you know, he took a one for the team. So now, you know, he's making it acceptable. And, you know, it's ironic to see
yeah,
successful people like Michael Phelps or Elon Musk smoke cannabis. And then you're like, oh, well, that immediately means you're a loser that's unemployable. Yet they've proven themselves to be Olympians, to be managers of industry, and even excelling beyond the American government in space technology. You know, it's very hard to criticize people like that, yet, you know, they they sometimes enjoy to smoke cannabis, or, you know, it's, which is like not part of the American norm. For, well, that used to be part of the American norm. Now, you know, now we're seeing a lot of referendum questions on, you know, mushroom legalization, and by, you know, city and state proposals in your referendum questions. So it's, you know, slowly but surely
yeah.
it's happening. And you know, now there's you know, ayahuasca sessions going on in Canada, and you know, this is, there are
In Winnipeg.
in Winnipeg, and you know, it's amazing to see that, you know, the world is going on regardless if, you know, the government or the policies of the old governments are falling behind, right? And you know, I think that's the right thing to do, right? If they're not willing to go in the right direction, then, you know, the rest of us will, and they'll you know, they'll trail along when they're ready.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, because you know more about this than I do, but isn't common law, like, doesn't it evolve because of the will of the people?
You know, we would like to think so, but as much as we do it in common law, it really, you know, the judge's decision really do set precedents. And so, you know, when we're talking about sovereignty rights, it's probably going to, perhaps, maybe at some point, it will become a sovereignty issue or a human rights issue on religious and spiritual beliefs. And you know, these are
Right.
really big questions, but I mean, it has the possibility. But for the longest time, because the judicial branch is unfortunately intertwined with the political branch, it's very difficult to get anything meaningful through, because as much as we hate to admit it, you know, if there are things that the government doesn't like, they will, you know, stop the wheels of justice, and they will prorogue a government. They will shut down a court decision. They will stop everything. They'll do anything to make sure that their policies and their opinions are what's set up. So, you know, it's very difficult. You know, there are private prosecutions, but even then, with private prosecutions, it becomes very difficult. And you know, that standard to uphold, to present evidence of grievances or of illegal behavior of a government, is very difficult. And you know, sometimes you don't even get a hearing. They just say, the judge says, we don't recognize your complaint, so we're not, you don't even get a process. So as much as
Mm-hmm.
we like common law, there are a lot of problems still that go on today. And, at some point, we're going to have to, just like in the 60s, and refuse to go to war. We're going to have to refuse to, these things, and we're going to have to come together and say, and I think COVID is the perfect, tipping point, or the perfect changing of transitional period, because everything is habit, right? If we change our habits, it's a lot easier when there's a chaotic episode that forces you to change your habits. It's
Yeah.
just like if you're trying to start a diet, it's almost impossible if you're set in your ways and nothing changes. But if you're starting a diet, and you're going on a trip, then your chances are automatically higher, because you're in a new environment. You're starting to form new habits. So your chances are a lot higher if you have higher discipline to get yourself into better habits. So if it's like that for anything, hopefully that COVID will make us more responsible as individuals, but responsible for ourselves and for the community, so that we lose that not my job, not my problem, it's past 5 p.m. attitude, because that's the kind of attitude. But I think how do we get rid of that not my problem, not my job attitude is just like, WestJet makes their employees, they give them shares. We need to make people part owners of their societies. We need to feel like they're a part of it, that they own society, and, they impact it. So, I think that's the only way how you get people to really care, because, a tenant and the owner of a property, they're going to treat the property differently. And if you own the property, you're going to care a lot more about its maintenance than if you're the tenant. So at the end of the day, I think it's very productive if we make a society that everybody owns their house, everybody owns their property, so that they don't, there's a safety net that they can fall back on. There's a way so that they can set themselves their own habits and their own responsibilities, instead of it being, in the tenant, we rent everything, or we lease our cars, because I think real wealth is the food you eat, the garden that you have, the ability to travel, the ability to do those kinds of things. That's real wealth. Money is not real wealth. Money is just a representation to buy that property that you need to get. But once you have that property, you should, if you have access to water, if you have access to food, then guess what? The government and, the system has less of a hold on you, and you have a lot more leeway and control over your life, over how you live. I mean, it's not for everybody. Not everybody wants to do homesteading and gardening and all that. But at the end of the day, I feel like I'd be a lot more in control and a lot more, free to live my life how I want, instead of being a cog in the capitalist system. What do you think of that?
Well, you said a lot there. And like going back to people investing in their society or in their lives, it's about motivation, but that's really about empowerment, and I think a lot of us have been feeling for a long time anxious or depressed, and just trying to just put one foot in front of the other and keep going, which really speaks so well of our strength and determination as a species and as individuals. But the problem is that we also are collective. We tend to go along in the direction that we're going, and we've taken some unfortunate turns that have not been healthy for us and have not been healthy for the environment. We're big polluters. We're really having a negative impact on our planet and on other species here, and we're not so happy ourselves. So but no one, and everyone knows it, but nobody feels like they have the power to change it. And so then we feel pain, and then we just want to soothe that pain with a way of escaping. Psychedelics are exactly the opposite of that. And they put you into direct awareness of that which you've been trying to avoid thinking about. but they also show you a way out. And that's really important. And this is why I think more and more people are wanting to come to psychedelic ceremonies where they're cared for and where they prepare for it in advance, so that it's not just a random thing. It's it's a whole process of preparation, and a whole process of what we call it ceremony, because it is a process, where
Right.
people are very well cared for as they go through this awakening, this new understanding, this
It's a unique,
insight.
it's such a unique environment where, you know, instead of it being very adversarial like everything else, very competitive in the business world, there it's, once you're at a ceremony, you know that everybody's there is there for the same reasons and is most likely very good intentioned and is open minded because they're doing a psychedelic experience to begin with. So you know that these people are pretty cool to begin with. They're pretty laid back, and there's somebody that you can talk to, and they're not going to be status and snooty, and
Mm.
think they're better than everyone else, right? So
It is a
it's
different
it's
arrangement,
such a
yes.
nice environment, and that's something where it's like when you're in the group, it's like I have the confidence to go talk to anybody, and I know that they're going to treat me with respect that I
Yeah.
would show them, right? And that is a unique environment. Unfortunately, it should be everywhere, but that's I think that's the reality of the spiritual, maybe the reemergence of spirituality in our community.
And I think a redefinition of spirituality as well, because it
Right.
really is an experience of what powerful spiritual beings we really are.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd had a pretty good grounding in metaphysics and philosophy and early spiritual teachings, and seeking all my life, but answers started coming much later in life, when I went back and re-engaged in psychedelics in an intentional way, and I started evolving and changing and integrating these experiences. And it actually really changed the trajectory, and I'm so glad it did. I mean, I was pretty happy with my life before, but I have to say, I'm really happy with my life. Like I feel like I've accomplished some of the purpose that I was put here to do. And I feel like I'm on the right path, which is a wonderful thing. It's so much better than wandering around lost, like I did for a lot of years in my life. So, very happy with the way that the guidance through the medicine has come to me, and also the way that it has helped me to evolve and self-actualize in ways that I actually didn't think I was capable of. So um, it's very humbling and very uplifting at the same time. Really wonderful experience, and nothing to do with ego or consuming or achieving. It's really very personal, and really very wonderful and life changing,
Well,
and
do you
makes you a better
remember
person.
do you remember when we were looking for another executive for the Psychedelic Society, and it's there's like coincidences that come up, or like the universe provides wherever you ask for it something, right? And it's so
Yes.
ironic, and when those moments happen, and it's not just once or twice, it happens all the time, every day, all around the world. And then we're like, oh, that's
Yeah.
just a coincidence. But it's like, there's no way that these are all coincidences. The universe is interconnected somehow. Somebody somewhere is dealing some cards and giving us a freebie once in a while, which is
Something's up. Yeah, for
something's up,
sure.
something's metaphysically up, because
Definitely.
that's I
Yeah.
think that's the most humanity's ever gonna come up with as a society is something's not right, and then
Something's going on here.
right,
But
right.
what's weird is I wonder how many years I lived completely blind to all the synchronicities. And I just feel so grateful that they all culminated in my ability to have enough of an open mind to revisit psychedelics and try it again. And I want to say, on a societal level, I'm also really happy that events have culminated to allow research to open up again on psychedelics and the way psychedelics can be used to benefit humankind. I mean, they shut down the research for almost 50 years, and they shut it down in 1972, and we're now just getting caught up again. And I mean, really, prejudices and biases aside, looking at it strictly from a capitalistic point of view, if you will, these medicines are much more cost efficient at helping people to heal from terrible addictions like to opiates without withdrawal and without craving, alcoholism, tobacco addiction, cluster headaches. There's been research on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's that's looking very positive. Definitely end of life existential crisis. We've now seen 4 cases go before the Supreme Court of Canada and been granted the right under Section 7 of our rights and freedoms to take this medicine, to take psilocybin, to assist them with end-of-life crisis. So, I mean, we're really starting to see the benefits of this in medicine and for society, because the cost of addictions alone is just so high. I mean, in terms of death and morbidity and treatments and the stuff we're doing just isn't working. I mean, we're getting maybe 5 to 15% recovery rate. When you use something like Iboga, you're getting 70% or better. When you use something like psilocybin intentionally, again, they've come back with over 70%. With tobacco cessation, it's over 80%. Show me another program that can do that as efficiently and effectively and cheaply as psychedelics can do. Ketamine, known to treat treatment-resistant depression. And to stop suicidality. So if someone is highly suicidal and they're treated with ketamine, it does remove that imperative to kill themselves. I mean, think of all the lives that could be saved by using these things intentionally. It's a no-brainer. So yes, there are some prejudices against it that are kind of like a hangover from what happened over 50 years ago, but like, let's wake up, people. Let's understand the value of these medicines, and the research is in, and it's just getting higher and higher every day. In my inbox, I receive at least 3 papers a day on research concerning the benefits of these traditional medicines in different ways. The key thing is, how are we going to be able to disseminate this in our culture? Certainly we'll follow the medical path to begin with, and I think that is correct. But eventually, when the healing is done, how are we going to use these medicines to benefit us in terms of growing too? Right. We have a lot of healing to do, but then we have some growing to do, and these medicines can help in both ways. Right. But they will change things. I mean, there should be a warning label on it. It's warning. This will change your life.
Warning, Michael Pollan wrote this book, How to Change Your Mind,
about psychedelics, and it will change your mind, it'll change your life, it'll change our society, but right. For the better.
Will it increase or decrease your existential crisis?
Oh, decrease, absolutely, decrease. Yes. That's the thing. Johns Hopkins did the research on that, and they were. It's available anywhere. You can go to the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. That would be maps.org. All of that research is published on their website. Please do look it up. Another really good place to look is the Hefter Institute, HEFFTER. Hefter right. Institute. That would be Dennis McKenna is the executive director there. All of this psilocybin research is published on their site. But there are just a ton of ways that MDMA is being used to treat trauma. And there's just so many. LSD is being used to treat anxiety. There are just so many different ways that different medicines can be used. Please, if you're listening, don't go out and buy some on the street and go and try to do it to treat your anxiety or something, because it doesn't work that way. Right. Let me be clear that you do this under the supervision of a trained therapist who knows how to work with these medicines. And again, it's dose, set, and setting. So you need to have the right dosage, and a professional will help you with that. You need to have the right mindset. Again, you need some counseling before you go into it. You need the right setting and integration. So there's a number of things that have to be in place before these medicines can actually benefit people. And
Right.
if they're misused, they can be harmful and even fatal. So not psilocybin. I don't think anyone's ever overdosed on psilocybin, but it could definitely shake you up. It could definitely not be beneficial.
And I
And
guess,
there are certain conditions where
yeah.
people shouldn't take it at all.
And maybe this is a good opportunity to address kind of the spiritual grifting that's occurred, where people take advantage of people's goodwill, people take advantage of the psychedelics, and have used it in inappropriate settings, and have used it to take advantage of people's. So it's that's a big issue too. So which is why you need to set a relationship of trust with the people that you're doing it, and not just go anywhere with anyone right off the bat.
Well, this is another strong argument for decriminalization, is that therapists are forced to practice underground.
Right.
Because the threat is we could be arrested, thrown in jail, whatever, and so nobody wants that. So as a result of practicing underground, keeping our heads down, doing the work and all that, although there are communities of practice, I collaborate with a number of different practitioners across the globe, mainly in Canada and the US, but also in other countries as well. However, it took me years to cultivate those collegial relationships, and I'm really grateful for them. But a lot of people are just practicing alone, and a lot of people have seen the potential to use this medicine to control people's minds. I think that's what Charles Manson had everybody strung out on acid in back in the day, and those kinds of things. So a lot of bad things can be done with this too, and because it's all underground, it's not being regulated. So that's a problem as well.
It's
We
difficult
would
to regulate
to have
shamanism,
a community of practitioners who can regulate and even make referrals, rather than people just being on their own to get their own street drugs and their own stuff off the street. Sorry, street drugs isn't the right phrase there, maybe, but sometimes it can be cut with bad things or not be what they think they're getting. So there's by the way, checkmydrugs.com is an organization. I think that's what it's called. Dana Larson started that in BC. And if you had something and you're not sure what it is, you can send it over to him. Just look it up, checkmydrugs.com, I think is what it's called. You can send a small amount of it over. He'll test it for you and let you know what it is. And it doesn't cost anything. So if you're interested and you're concerned about something that you would like to take, but you're not sure if it's safe, that's the way to find out.
And there's also, I believe there's a lot of some websites, maybe that one too, they do sell test kits for certain things too, where you can test it yourself at home.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So one way or the other, if you've got something there and you're not sure if it's safe, find out before you take it.
Right.
And also really make sure that you've got somebody sober who's sitting with you, so that if you do get into any trouble, that they can get some help for you, and make sure that sober person knows something about how to sit with psychedelics, because people tend to, if they don't know, they might make a mistake and call 911 when it wasn't necessary.
Because they get freaked out for some reason. But they get nervous. Yeah. They get nervous. But realistically, as long as people are conscious breathing and not having a medical emergency, there's no reason to ever call an ambulance, right? Maybe because you're having an uncomfortable experience for 30 minutes, realistically, there's a difference between a medical emergency and, being uncomfortable, and freaking out, right?
Well, I guess it depends on what your experience has been in the past, though, because these can be unusual experiences. So I highly recommend having a trip sitter. And again, for everybody listening out there, if you're interested in learning how to be a trip sitter, I would encourage you to reach out to the Winnipeg Psychedelic Society. Psychedelic Society of Winnipeg. There's a Facebook page and
I'll put the links in
Instagram
the description.
page, there's also a way to email the Psychedelic Society of Winnipeg, and just ask. Just let us know that you want to have this training, and I'd be more than happy to set up, an afternoon training for people that want to be trip sitters, so that you know how to sit for somebody, so that you know what to look for, when there's trouble and when there isn't, and when to get involved and when to sit back. So happy to do it if people are interested in learning about it.
That's really great. Do you ever think, if we go down that road of, medical and legalization or decriminalization, do you think that Canada will ever have a kind of, shaman school where people get certified to become shamans? Or how do you think that's going to become a more, integrated in our society?
Well, getting back to culture and customs and traditions around these medicines, one of the things that I've learned is that shamans never call themselves shamans.
Right.
Healers never call themselves healers. If someone's putting it out there that they're a shaman or they're a healer, I'd be a little suspicious of that person.
Right, exactly.
Sounds like a bit of ego aggrandizement maybe going on there.
Right.
But one of the things that I also learned, and I was very fortunate, happy to share this resource as well, is the Foundation for Shamanic Studies. I think it's .com.
And now we're not shamans, we're shamanologists, where we study shamanism.
Okay. Well, it was founded by Michael Harner, who was an anthropologist who studied people in South America from during his dissertation at, I think it was Berkeley, and and eventually developed a whole career of just going around the world and meeting a bunch of different cultures that use shamanic practices, and founded the Foundation for Shamanic Studies because in his travels he discovered certain commonalities between all shaman tribes, all medicine tribes. Simple things like sitting in a circle, fire in the center of the circle, drumming, talking to dead people, our ancestors, right? And so these are kind of common things that all humans have used for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and they've survived in untouched cultures. Our Western industrialized culture has lost our grasp on all of that stuff, and we need to get it back, right? And so we can reclaim it, but we begin with instead of reinventing the wheel, begin with what we know to be consistent throughout all cultures. So our roots would have been consistent with that too. More than likely, your ancestors sat in a circle around a fire. And if you're from the British Isles, they were probably consuming plants that made them see the fairies.
Right.
And so this is how we reclaim our heritage. And again, it's kind of like learn a lesson from the cannabis industry, because what happened there was the commodification of sacred medicine, Santa Maria, and it's been used by the capitalist system. So the medicine is being used in that way. So we want to be careful that we're not doing the same thing as we introduce entheogenic medicines into our culture. We want to make sure that we're not using them.
Right. And, there is a place for, the convenience of everything, but, it should be also an option to, instead of paying for the cannabis at the store, I should be able to grow a few plants myself, right? The democratization of nature and, the ability to, grow or create your own psychedelics. I mean, that's, I think, the future as well, where we need to make sure that it's accessible to all sovereign adults. Everybody, who is an adult that, should be and should have the inalienable human right to, experience their consciousness as they see fit. And if we're going to rob people's ability to decide how they experience consciousness, then I mean, we're not a free society at all. It's a big fundamental question, and hopefully people come to that realization, and we can really maybe take that to the next level.
Well, yes, that's an excellent point. Sovereignty of consciousness is a phrase that's often used in psychedelic community. Are you allowed to have control over your own mind?
Even if it's at your detriment. I mean, realistically, that should be the right, because I mean, right now people have the right to, destroy their livers with, drinking 4 bottles of vodka and going into a medical poison state and you can literally die of blood alcohol poisoning. So
it's perfectly legal.
It's perfectly legal. I can buy,
Yes.
3 dozen packs of cigarette and smoke them all in a day if I really tried, and it's not illegal, right? So
not a problem.
At a certain point, we need to give people the liberty of being an adult and saying, well, knives are sharp and, you might hurt yourself, but you're an adult. You have the ability and you have the responsibility of using kitchenware and not hurt yourself. If you do, then that's unfortunate. But I mean, life is dangerous. Life, there's no guarantee and fairness in life. So we have to have the ability to at the very least, have control over our own body, our own consciousness. And, this is, I think, a basic fundamental principle that has been overlooked, or maybe it's because we didn't really think of consciousness as something that's being manipulated and is something that's right, just like before, we didn't know that sexuality needed to be a right, and now, it is a fundamental right to express your sexuality, and that's these things take time for society to realize its importance. And maybe this is the next the next, important social issue is, the deconditioning of the mind, or the destructuring of the manipulation behind, corporate materialism, all the advertising, right? The message is the medium, or the medium is the message, Michael McLuhan, that kind of thing, right? So, it becomes... It's essentially, I think it boils down to a war of ideas, a war of, core philosophies of, are you somebody who wants corporate success and constant growth and is, only thinking about their own mortality and their own, little world? Or are you thinking in terms of the entire world, thinking of terms of your neighbors, your family, everyone being involved and interconnected, right?
Really interesting that that we're talking about this, and that we're able to talk about this way, because we're seeing it playing out on the world stage. I mean, the first part of our consciousness that hit was COVID. That was the first change, where we weren't in ordinary reality anymore. Next thing that happened was the wave of awareness about racial discrimination, and for me, like a huge awakening to my blindness, to the suffering of others, to that extent, when it came to race, just my lack of awareness, which made me realize, geez, that's really racist. I need to wake up out of that, and so I did. It woke me up. And then, and now the next thing that's happening is this dichotomy of ideologies. Let's open up the business, and if people die, they die. Who cares? We got to get the market up. We got to get the economy rocking, as he says.
Right.
This pushback from people saying, no, we are not going to sacrifice lives for this continuation of this capitalist system that really has sacrificed the rights and freedoms of people of color, and Indigenous people for generations. I mean, it's a terrible thing. This is what makes us not good animals
Right.
as a species. You know, is this ideology that the only thing that matters is
Yet,
money and markets
yet
and
now, because of the global interconnected nature of the global economic system that we're living under, now because of COVID, it's actually, the UN just released a report saying that, over 200 million people are facing starvation and increased poverty in the developing world because of the shutdowns and the economic trading in the globe. So now, not only is it affecting, the America and everywhere, it's affecting so many places, and it's affecting developing countries that are already at a disadvantage.
yeah.
So right now, it's a really chaotic situation, and it's really unfortunate.
Well, it's going to be tough, and the only way that we're going to get out of it is to work together.
Right.
And this is what we have to do: is start finding our unity, start finding the way that we're united, rather than this divisiveness that's been going on. You know, this we've got to move past that and into a time of unity. I mean, if you look at all of the predictions, age of Aquarius through astrology and uh, Kali Yuga. If you want to look at different traditions have different what you would call mythologies around these kinds of things around this time that we're entering into. But really, definitely, we are not in ordinary reality anymore. I don't think I have to tell anybody that. A lot of things have changed since early spring, and things continue to change all the time. The certainty that we had before is gone from us now, and we're having to adapt, which is what a species does if it's going to survive. It has to adapt. And one of the things that I do know about psychedelics is it does help us to adapt. It helps us to find that balance within ourselves, within our communities, and with nature and globally. Ultimately, it made a huge impact in the 60s, and it was completely unfocused effort. If we actually focused our effort now and started using psychedelics intentionally and purposefully, we could make a huge difference. We are not powerless as we originally thought, because we were so oppressed, we were depressed.
Mm.
But we're not powerless. We're not at all, and psychedelics wake us up to that power. So, there's a lot of hope, but it's it's late days. We lost 50 years almost of research, 45 anyway, of research and of bringing psychedelics into the modern age. Where really it's going to be tight.
It's going to be a photo finish, as the
Well,
old
yeah.
saying, between chaos and education, and we'll see who wins out on top, you know.
Sound like Ken Wilber. I think that's what he said.
That's very probable. I think so.
Yeah,
It's definitely not my
it's the
original idea.
stages.
I'm not plagiarizing anything.
No, I love Ken Wilber for that reason, because it really is about the as individuals we're evolving, as a society we're evolving, as a species we're evolving, and we want to make sure that we continue our evolution in a positive way. We've taken a little bit of a step off of the correct course, and we've been slapped down because of it. I mean, COVID didn't
Right.
just happen because random. It happened because we're the global warming is causing forests to burn, and we're
Right.
also destroying forests, and that's
We're not
causing animal
responsible.
populations to evacuate, and animals end up with each other that wouldn't normally under very stressed conditions, and then things happen that get transmitted to humans. So we really are the author of our own destruction if we don't change our ways. It
Right.
sound like gloom and doom, but unfortunately, it's really true. We have to take responsibility. We cannot behave like children, crashing around and being destructive. We must find an ideology and a way of expressing that ideology that is concerned with our fellow human beings, concerned with our planet, and most of all, aware that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and we need to evolve spiritually.
And that's a really great point. There's a lot of like really, really nice stories and ancient spiritual practices by the First Nations in Canada and America, where a lot of the same stories come out, and a lot of allegories are so similar to every culture that comes up, where common principles of ancestors, spirits, and those kinds of connections with nature are common in almost any culture. And it's really beautiful that even if we lose it somewhere, we can always find it again, and we can just in ourselves, just by our life and our habits and experience, we can always come back to it, or it's never truly lost, I think.
It's really cool that you say that too, because I was just thinking about how scripturally speaking, there's this line in the Bible: first will come last, and last will come first. And I think we've always imagined ourselves as such a highly evolved society, and we're so much more advanced than these primitive cultures. And yet, when it really comes down to the wire, it's these original cultures that have so much to teach us about how our culture needs to evolve and kind of find its way back to our roots while still going forward. So we need to be kind of capturing both sides, capturing our original traditions and creating new ones that will benefit us in our society going forward.
In evolutionary theory today, and Darwinism, the reductionists, they a lot of the times they like to say it's like we were saying before, it's brain chemistry perturbation, and they don't really
Right.
address those kinds of historical accounts, or that kind of lineage of historical orated history, and not written history, and those things like that. And it kind of goes to show why we strayed from the path so much.
Well, and these are exactly the kind of people that would really benefit from a guided psychedelic experience, because when they were doing the work at Johns Hopkins on the end of life patients, and people said that it was, like, the majority of people said it was among the 5 most important experiences of their lives. And these are people that have lived some. They weren't young folk; they were older people. End of life kind of people.
Right.
And it was up there in the top 5. So it made a huge on them in terms of who they are, what their place in the world is, even what consciousness is all about. So I think it would really be helpful for those people. Although there is, you can call it brain perturbation or brain support. Like, I mean, if you look at what antidepressants do to your brain, psilocybin works in a very similar way with your brain, only instead of inhibiting a reuptake, it actually stimulates the part of the brain that produces serotonin. So you don't need to change the receptors and actually misshape them. You just have the brain functioning normally as it was meant to be, and have the serotonin just coming because the brain is producing it. So
Right.
nothing is getting inhibited. It's just working properly. So, and not only that, but then we're looking, instead of at a treatment, we're actually looking at a cure, because people resolve their depression, and then they don't need to be taking microdose anymore, or
Right.
large doses.
Well, I think we haven't even brought up the fact that DMT itself is found in the human neocortex, and in the lungs, and in the spinal fluid. So and a lot of people talk about near-death experiences, and experiencing the same kind of reality that you have in a DMT experience. And if we can't criminalize a substance that occurs naturally in nature, and actually occurs in our own psychology and in our own chemistry, that would be, like Dennis McKenna says, it would be making humanity illegal by virtue of having these drugs inside of us, right? So we're criminalizing ourselves and consciousness. And this is a big point where the Darwinists talk about evolution, and we can never use the word evolution unless it's about the cellular advancement of biology. We can't say that the human mind evolves. It just develops. It's not the same word, or it's not the same. Yet anyone who looks at reality for more than 5 seconds can tell you that we're always evolving. We're never stagnant. Everything is constantly changing. So the idea that, oh no, only cells evolve. We can't talk about human evolution as a
Yeah.
philosophical
Evolution of
concept.
consciousness, or
Right.
cultural evolution.
Right.
But that's a really rigid scientific view, and I respect it too, because some people have to be the gatekeepers of that kind of thing, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, you're right, we're evolving. We've been evolving. All you have to do is look at an old movie, look at the original King Kong. You'll see how evolved we've come in just a few short years. Early movies are a great record of the ideology that was existent not too long ago. And so, yeah, our consciousness is constantly evolving. The one thing that psychedelics will do very effectively is speed that up.
Do you think perhaps that maybe, humanity can essentially be, with our consciousness, we become the shepherds of reality, or the shepherds of consciousness, where, even if we do take advantage of nature and use it for materialism and all these things, when we go to Mars, let's say, and we colonize Mars, the notion, we're going to trash the Earth and then move to Mars, it's like, well, I don't think that's the reality. Is going to be, we're going to stay on Earth. Some of us will go to Mars, and then by virtue of becoming interplanetary, having an insurance policy on humanity, and by virtue of us going there, we're not going there alone. If we're going there, we need to bring food. We need to bring trees to make oxygen. So all of nature, all of biology is coming for the ride with us. So there's no separation between humanity and the rest of nature. If we're going to any other planet, we're bringing animals, we're bringing seeds, we're bringing life with us. And maybe that's, plants made animals to move seeds around. Maybe that's just the extreme level of nature created us to get off the planet and have an insurance policy where we're interplanetary, where we have a string of reality that is shared by multiple planets. And maybe that's nature's way of having an insurance policy in case another asteroid hits, like with the dinosaurs, right? I think nature is a lot more intelligent than we give it credit for. And if that's the case, then that's so much meaning, and so much, nature has given us such a great opportunity to be the shepherds of reality and be responsible and, take care of the universe. And maybe that's a hubris way of looking at it, but I think maybe that's nature giving us some kind of responsibility of some kind.
And maybe we're ready for that responsibility now. Maybe that's why this is all happening now too, in the perhaps greater scheme of things, everything, we're all exactly where we're supposed to be at exactly
Right.
this moment. So that's really cool. I'm glad you brought that up. Listen, I gotta go. It's 3:00.
Yes. No, we've been going on for quite a while. So
yeah,
I
but
really
it was really
appreciate
great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me. It was wonderful to be here. A great conversation.
Absolutely. So I thank you again for coming on the podcast. This was so much fun. We'll definitely have to have you on again in a couple of months.
I'd love it.
I mean, there's so much to talk about, and we only scratched the surface, I think. So we'll have you back on and keep talking about this fun stuff.
Who knows what'll be happening then?
Oh my goodness, right? Everything's going on so fast. We'll have to try and keep up. So thank you. Stay tuned. Thank you, everybody, for watching the Conscious Queries podcast. Again, I'm your host, Dominic. You'll get an episode every week. So stay tuned for that. And thank you again. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. All right. Kate, are you still there?